Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil YouTube video. Today we've got an FAQ video, and it's FAQ number 1 for 2026. It's actually like the last 2 days of 2025 while I record this, but we're planning ahead. And so what I'd like to do is do something a little different. We're still gonna do our YouTube FAQ videos, and they will be associated with the season and the video that it's pulled from. But for 2026, we're gonna add to it fundamental, foundational FAQs. That way when someone's new and maybe they're a little scared to ask questions on social media because of some of the like Facebook group onslaught answers you get of CalMag and russet mites and whatever else, we're gonna do the foundational FAQs where we have a database of FAQs. We have videos that go along so that anybody, no matter their skill level, can start to grasp this. And that's what we're gonna do today, is start with the foundation and the beginning. And so you'll see a lot more of these videos, but we will also be doing our YouTube FAQs just a little bit more organized. So look forward to that this year. I'm gonna get started. So let's go over the question. First one for the foundational FAQ for 2026, living soil basics, okay? What is living soil, right? Like, what is this living organic soil or this no-till living soil? And so you'll hear these terms thrown around, and when I started BuildASoil, there was absolutely nobody using these terms, because behind the scenes on the forums, there was a few growers that had basically coined this term, and I was just in the right place at the right time. In fact, I helped buy the domain and start livingorganicsoil.org, which was the original forum for living organic soil, once it had been clear that, hey, Coot and Microman and all these people and all the people that got kicked out of like ICMag and Grass City and these, it was just like a, how do we find this info? And so we thought, instead of it being hidden and getting kicked out in arguments and everyone controlling it, we would start our own forum. And I was pretty clear up front that, hey, look, I've just started BuildASoil. It's a lot for me to take on. So my primary interest is BuildASoil, but I'll help and I'm gonna have fun with this. And really quickly, Gascanistan and MGD and Coot and Microman and like, the list goes on, right? From original members, so to speak. They started jumping in and started creating all the tutorials, all the different threads. It was phenomenal. And the reason why I'm explaining that is, to me, in my mind, living organic soil, that means something specific. And it's been very greenwashed these days by every company that was like, yeah, we do that too. And so now everything's living organic soil. In fact, in my soil review video, you can see I'm looking at like the Gaia Green company that got sold out. They literally released a product called Living Organic Soil. And what's crazy, the reason why you don't see it on the bag, like you won't even see Living Organic Soil written on our 3.0 recipe, because as soon as you do that, right, now you have to worry about every organic certification for using the word organic. Even company like Organics Alive has to explicitly state it's not for organic use, because every state has a different rule and they use the word organic in the label. So it was kind of ripe for taking advantage of. And so I'd like to start off this FAQ with what living soil is, what it means to me, what we believe in, and where that came from. And so before livingorganicsoil.org and before the recycled organic living soil through like recycle, that whole thread, the rolls thread on ICMag, there was no living organic soil. There were other styles. There was, soil growers. There was organic soil growers. There were organic growers. And you'd have people doing like ProMix and organic nutrients, Roots Organics or nutrients, or they'd be using the organic side of some of these big marketing companies at the time. And so everybody had like their organic version, and usually it was like humicky and fishy and whatever else. That was an organic style. And so to differentiate ourselves, to say, no, we're not that organic style, and we're not the organic soil where they just buy a bag of Fox Farm and feed it Beastie Blooms and stuff. We were like, no, we're the cutting edge as far as what we've understood nature to do and what produces the best results, the best quality, and that's all we care about. And it was a big kick on like, you don't need anything from a store? What? I thought you had to have a pH meter and all this stuff. So that's where this conversation came from, and that's why the certain terminology, living organic soil, eventually turned into no-till, and what that meant. And that's why people talk about it. Nowadays, people just throw it around, and so you'll hear it all over the place, but it wasn't that way. And so I'm gonna read to you a little excerpt from what I've written for the book, kind of to try it out loud, because the book's not obviously available yet, but also because it's probably better than my wild rambling. Once I'm done with that, I'm gonna ramble because I got a few more questions. So rest assured, I've got some typical FAQ style stuff coming. All right, so what is living organic soil? The term living organic soil was created to make it easier to explain a new style of growing that was emerging. Back then, if you said you grew in organic soil, people assumed you meant potting soil with bottled nutrients. You have to understand the setting at the time. Overgrow grow forums had been shut down. There were raids on hydro shops that had listed customers with illegal grows. Literally, they knew all the customers and went and raided them like it was fucking crazy. Seed banks overseas were thought to be involved, and this created a hysteria about getting caught. Back then, cannabis growers were a captive audience that couldn't ask many questions about how to grow. This created the perfect marketplace to sell, and the standard method for organic growers was to use a premium potting soil with an expensive bottled nutrient, or like a pro mix with the bottled nutrients, right? And so at harvest, you would toss it all and you would start over again each time. And you had to use a metal halide light, and then you had to use an HPS light, and then you had to buy those bulbs like every cycle if you want to get the Hortilux and crush it, versus like getting the cheapie and replacing it every cycle, or maybe letting the Hortilux go 2 cycles. Like, there was a lot to the finance of keeping you on the like perfect come in every couple months and buy stuff, which is good for business, right? Part of why people thought BuildASoil wouldn't really work. We teach you to keep your soil. And so anyways, let's keep going. Years later, emerging legal markets started opening up communication among growers, and you started to read about methods like the Subcool Super Soil, the Rev's True Living Organics. And the Super Soil was like a hot soil mix that you'd make from stuff easily available at every garden store and big box store. And so if you think about it, it wasn't like a scientifically formulated recipe. It was a recipe created from the black market by saying, look at all this shit put together from these stores. You don't have to tell them what you're growing. You don't have to go online. Just go buy this stuff. It'll work. And so it almost became like a jailhouse prep for like some crazy, like you had the nachos, you had the Fritos, you had the, like, that's how you make it. And so it worked, don't get me wrong, but that's the origin of where it came from. And of course, there's world record pumpkin growers and there's gardening stuff that people were taking from, but really a lot of it trickled down from cannabis into the other areas, and that's still true today. Then you have the Rev's True Living Organics, and that was like a small container to mimic the way people were already growing hydroponically, which was like 1 to 3 gallon containers, maybe 5 at the most. And so instead of just switching out and saying, go huge containers, which wouldn't really work. The model was these small ones. The Rev used layers, spikes of nutrients shoved in there, all sorts of tricks to try and allow this plant to feed itself in a small container, which is very hard. And so credit to him for creating some sort of system that works, but it wasn't for us. Then you had Tom Hill's Grow Big Trees recipe. A lot of outdoor growers copying that with the Stutzman's chicken manure, and it says organic and all this, and then you realize it is all industrial chicken waste. None of it's organic. None of it comes from organic farms. And so you're like, well, shit, that's crazy. Anyways, there were attempts to commercialize super soil, but it's really best made at home. And all these methods still usually ended up in growers tossing all the soil out and starting again from scratch each time. Because of this, only the die-hard soil growers would continue run after run. And much of this spawned the initial conversation that eventually became the no-till living organic soil methodology. Okay. Talking grower to grower, explaining all the difference was a mouthful. So for those growers that had seen it all, we knew this was something very different. Eventually, the community started calling the new movement, or these new methods, living organic soil, or living soil. After a thread appeared on the forums titled Living Organic Soil, from start through recycling. I think Gascanistan started it. He was the first post on there, so props, credit. Sometimes called the ROLS thread, ROLS, for recycled organic living soil. So you can see how it's confusing when the words and the terminology get switched around. Gascanistan started the thread, and right away, Coot jumped in on the page with his recipe. Those early posts and the people who contributed to them were instrumental in shaping what became the Living Soil movement, what became livingsoil.org, what eventually became the beginning of BuildASoil, and all the stuff that I do today. And so this isn't my invention whatsoever. This is just my way of sharing it with the world because it was so powerful to me at that time in my life. So as more growers tried these recipes, a new approach began to take shape. Originally, the cycle was simple. Run your plants in something like a 5-gallon pot, then dump out the container at harvest and recycle the soil by amending it with a list of ingredients everyone was discussing. Over time, growers began moving to larger containers for bigger plants and better yields. And that's when we realized recycling soil outside of its container was unnecessary work and could even harm the ecosystem we had built. The first no-till grows appeared, and soon it was a race to the big beds. Growers were filling 100-gallon outdoor pots and putting them inside. 4x4 raised beds, indoors and out, and the results were incredible. That's when living organic soil truly came into its own. So I hope that gives you a breakdown. There's a lot more that's going to be in the book, behind the scenes of like some of the drama and stuff that happened. But not all that matters. I just wanted to tell you that's where living organic soil came from. And so what is it? What is it really, now that you know like the story? Well, it is, instead of potting soil, which they make for shipping around the world lightweight, which usually is comprised of peat moss and perlite. And typically what they do is the peat moss is expensive, and so they will actually throw in wood waste from like the forest industry. And so out here we have beetle kill wood. They have to remove it all from the forest, and then it gets chopped up and sold as like playground bark and all sorts of stuff. Well, across the country, depending on where you live, especially in like the Pacific Northwest, where a lot of the potting soil is made, they would have the greenhouses that would distribute the plants all over the world, you know, to Home Depot and stuff throughout the country. So that's where a lot of it was originating. Not all of it, but that's where a big epicenter is. And you have tree farms, you have all this stuff. And so when you look at like potting soil, it was shipped all over. It had to be super lightweight for freight. It had to be pennies to be a commodity. It was like hydro, basically, soilless. It's literally not soil. It's just peat moss, perlite, and chopped up wood products. Sometimes like vermiculite or sand, right? And so what living soil is, what living organic soil is an attempt to biomimic that fertile top layer in the most productive organic farm. We're talking massive amounts of organic matter on the top, and then there's minerals down below. Now, we don't have the whole earth, so what we did is Coot suggested a recipe, and Gascanistan has his recipe, but the percentages were based on, I believe, the Cornell recipe, which was like a third peat moss, a third compost, and a third aeration, like perlite. And it may have even been simpler, where it was like perlite, peat moss. I'd have to go look it up. But Coot said, let's just do a third, okay? And obviously he's been experimenting and tinkering, and his big claim to fame was that he made his own vermicompost, and he worked through it, the neem cake and the comfrey and all the stuff from his garden, so that when the castings were done, they were like our Colorado Worm Company castings, like 10 times more potent than the average. That is what he made his recipe with, his 1/3. That is potent soil that has been cooled by the worms, so it's not going to be hot or fast release, and it performs. And so a living soil, a third peat moss, a third pumice and rice hulls, a third compost. You could do compost worm castings. You could do pumice lava rock rice hulls. You could do peat and cocoa. There's 3 parts. It's that base, like the peat, the drainage component, and the premium compost. Now here's what would happen. People would learn about this, and then they'd go, bet. Craigslist, guys got the compost down the street, got peat moss from the torn bag last year at Home Depot they had out back, and then I just went and got some lava rock. And then the lava rock would be kind of like heavy in there. The peat moss was dry and hydrophobic, and they didn't treat it properly, and we just didn't know what we didn't know. And maybe they like overdid one of the portions by not knowing the math at the time. And then that compost, to top it off from Craigslist, had a little excess sodium and magnesium, maybe no phosphorus or calcium, and then it just wouldn't work the same as the guy down the street. So we started doing soil testing, and we realized that based on Coot's recipe, it was so close. And the reason why, he copied Steve Solomon's complete organic fertilizer, and we teach that too. And so Coot was smart. He said the third, basically potting soil ready to go. Next, you're gonna add 4 cups of rock dust and calciums. And so half, 2 cups, basalt rock dust. Used to be glacial, till Coot and many of us realized the single source volcanic material, the basalt, is better. The other 2 cups, 1 cup gypsum, 1 cup oyster. Those 4 cups added per cubic foot of your base, it was a game changer. And if you look up the complete organic fertilizer, there's reasons why, but the gypsum and oyster would stack the calcium, and it would make it perfect for soil testing. And then even if the compost wasn't perfect, and the other amendments like the kelp and the crustacean and the neem didn't add that much, it stayed in order because calcium was at the top. The pH would be dialed. The premium compost, if you found it, that was like the game changer. And so when BuildASoil started, we did lots of testing. It really enabled people to have more uniform results, even though it's not perfect, because organic is not 100% controlled like hydro is. So if that scares you, it may not be for you. But today, it's more controlled and accurate than it's ever been. We have like the foundation to teach you and exactly how to get really good results. I mean, the last 4x4 we pulled down was like 24.5 ounces. It's ridiculous. That was impossible in the beginning under the CMHs and the old bulbs with the old recipes and not knowing how to water. And so we've unlocked it, and living organic soil is copious amounts of minerals, which is the rock dust. That's what makes real soil outside. And then the organic matter on a healthy farm was typically from animal moving, like animal husbandry, right? And then the grasses and the mulch layer all decomposing, the chopped and dropped cover crop and plants. And so that's what makes up like the compost. You've got the minerals, the peat moss. It literally makes something that is as if we could create perfect soil. And what I've realized is not all of us, in fact, very, very few of us will have acreage of prime virgin soil that has everything ready to go, like back in the day when you'd start a farm. A lot of times you like have no land. You're in an apartment, you've got a garage, you've got a patio. If you do have land, it is atrocious. And so, of course, we want to encourage you, build the land. We'll teach you how to do it alongside. We've done it with our vegetable farm using the native soil, using these same principles of living organic soil. But you can start it all day one, year one, immediately when you learn the principles of living organic soil. And so, bringing it all back together, living organic soil comes from a specific place. It means something. The recipes are heavy in rock dust, heavy in compost, and we don't use perlite. We use pumice, rice hulls, things that last forever, that makes the soil so you can keep it, so you do not throw it away round after round, and is the big difference. So now when you're shopping and you look at the store and you're like, oh, $2 for a bag. It's like, that doesn't even pay for the bagging and the pallet, which means it was bagged down the street at a municipal waste location. Likely, if you read the ingredients, it has human manure or biosolids in it, and it's not to be used in the garden. Then you'll see like the organic this and organic that, and you can see our whole soil video we did on all those soils. They're not very good, okay? It's just not the same as living organic soil, and it doesn't compare in the same way, and it's confusing. And so when you're looking at it going $2, $10, $20, and then you see a bag of premium, handmade, not some third party. We have guys hand weighing and bucketing and scooping all the minerals and nutrients, putting it in our little soil line in this building just for that, and sending every batch to the lab. And of course, it's organic. It's not gonna be scientifically perfect like chemical salts, but damn, it's good. And then you look at the price, you're like, ugh, but you never throw it away. And it's a huge, huge difference. And once you do the math after your second or third round, living organic soil is a game changer. So you can make it yourself anywhere in the world. We teach the recipes. Even investing into that does cost more, but you do it once. You do it right, and then you don't throw it away. And so some people almost become like attached to it when they made it from scratch, and they never ever want to get rid of it, and they keep improving it and adding to it. And that's fun. In fact, a lot of us in the beginning would go to the local forest and find little like leaf litter under this tree there and find some good stuff, and then add it to your soil, and it feels even more like a custom creation. And I encourage you to do it responsibly. The last part that I'd like to add onto that before I get to the next question, even though I'm rambling, is what are the ingredients in living soil that are for fertility? What do we amend with? And so in Coot's recipe, he was extremely specific for his complete organic fertilizer recipe. His was based on neem cake from India. The reason why is it's a nitrogen fixing legume tree that improves the land that it's in, and they're not farmed, they're just wild growing, and the locals would go harvest the seed in a bag and bring it to the local processing center to get paid extra money. And so it was wild harvested, not farmed, low in heavy metal, nitrogen fixing, like all of it. Plus you add on thousands of years of history that he taught me about neem and the benefits and the 30 or 40 different compounds that are in there that are medicinal. And so he added that as his seed meal. Now you can use soy or corn, but those are GMO. And so we avoid those unless they're non-GMO, organic, and used by a company, certified by a company that we trust. Like there's ancient corn, there's good stuff, right? But then there's GMO Roundup corn, big difference. And so ingredients like that become important, and that's part of the backbone of living soil. On the forums, if you go find that rolls thread, which I'll link in the book, but you won't see any mention, especially in the beginning of all these recipes. You won't see like steamed bone meal, and you won't see blood meal, and you're not gonna see chicken manure, and there's discussion about it, but most of the discussion was, oh my gosh, we found out that that just comes from the industrial confined animal farms, which are the worst offenders that we don't wanna support. Are there other materials? And everyone chimed in, and it was like, yeah, literally everything could work. Like calcium carbonate's calcium carbonate's calcium carbonate. So you can get lime, you can get oyster shell flour, you can get dolomite lime, you can get ag lime, but they're all calcium carbonate. Now, there's some differences in magnesium in some of them. Some of them might have heavy metals, which is why we use the oyster, because it's been processed through the ocean, through not even an animal, through like an organism. Hard to explain, almost like a plant, an oyster, right? Even vegans eat them sometimes, but it's an ancient deposit. And because of that, there's no heavy metals in it. So each ingredient has specific thought and purpose. And so when you flip over a bag and it says blood meal, bone meal, chicken manure like that, you're like, this isn't living organic soil. This is some company that put living organic soil on the bag. Those aren't ingredients that any of the homies would have agreed on when we were creating this as an actual like style, as a philosophy, as a lifestyle. So that's what living organic soil means, okay? Is living soil organic? This is a fun question because part of the fundamentals that really opened my eyes when I started growing in this way was like literally I would go to the grow shop, and I remember the girl Sky at the time down at the shop. Scotty, what up? I see him commenting on social media all the time. It's wild now how it's come full circle. But at his shop, I'd go in there and they would be making compost tea, which is rad because Storch at the time was selling the compost tea brewers and everyone was in a compost tea, and he had the badass one. And I don't know if he did it or others did it. It was super smart. They had the Vortex brewer and they'd give out compost tea as a way to get you back in the store. But Sky would add some of that rainbow bloom. I swear that's what it was. And I remember looking on the back going, what's like iron sulfate and stuff? This isn't organic. And I didn't know that in organics, the micronutrients were the same as in hydro. But then I started reading all the other products that are out there, and I started reading all the ingredients, and I just was like, wow, there are not a lot of companies that have thought out through these ingredients. They just kind of buy what's on the market and repackage it. And it's all the same stuff over and over. It's guano and bone and whatever, and it's the cheapest. And so of course it makes sense. It's like back in the day, there was no organic aisle at the grocery store because nobody asked for it, and it seemed stupid at the time. But now, even at my grocery store that's not like the nice one, not the new one that has all the organic stuff, the organic stuff's like wiped out and they're expanding it. And so I feel like people are realizing it. Like when I was in high school, people were like, oh, Roundup's safe. And now it's like, will cause cancer, there's lawsuits. And if you've been around seeing that the whole time, it's interesting because you can like know what it was like to hear all the conflicting information and just trust your gut and say that stuff's poison. And then 20 years later, be like, holy shit, it was, you know? So that leads me more and more down this lifestyle, down this path of just not taking any ingredient for granted and just paying attention to it. So why do I care when I discuss, is living soil organic? Well, if you go to the farmer's market and you buy produce, local farmer's market from the farm down the street that uses no pesticides, no herbicides, nothing bad whatsoever, and puts all their love into it, they can't call it organic. And so that's why a lot of times you won't see the word organic on it. However, it is 100% organic in the sense that we're taking all the best of the organic philosophy and the cleanliness of ingredients and everything possible and putting that into living organic soil. But that doesn't mean that if you're at the store and someone calls something living soil and they haven't seen this video or they just don't know the whole story, right? I forget, it's been over a decade. It's been over 12 years since we started BuildASoil, and it's like, I just feel like I'm in this vacuum sometimes where I feel like everybody knows what I know and we all think about the same things. And it's like, this might be your first day, right? It's crazy. So living organic soil, living soil does not always mean organic. A lot of people just greenwash it and they do all sorts of stuff that's not organic and they call it living soil. And what I find even more strange is like, we don't put mycorrhizae in our potting soil and seal it in a bag. Because once it sporulates, like once it activates, it needs to be with a plant. So to me, it just doesn't make sense to say we put all these microbes in a bag and sealed it. I would rather teach you that living soil is not a product. Living soil is a system. And so when you work with BuildASoil or you make your own recipe, you're creating the foundation of the system, but then you have to do the cover crop, the mulch layer, the worms, and get the probiotics, mycorrhizae, all the stuff going that you can call it living soil. And you'll know because you move the mulch and it's fucking alive, like stuff's moving. That's living soil. In a bag, it's the foundation for it. There isn't a product, living organic soil. That's a style, it's a system, it's a method, and that's what we intend to support. Can beginners use living soil? Yes, this is so important. I feel like when I first started, it wasn't necessarily a beginner's thing because you had to know a little bit because there was no set path, there was no SOP, there was no, exact way. And that really, I think, scared a lot of people. Many people were like, bro, I just need to get a couple pounds. Part A, part B, pH, done, right? So why is this so complicated? And I think a lot of us got kind of into it up on a pedestal a little bit, like our way is harder. You don't know, organics is better. But I think that's bullshit. And for the most part, now when I think about teaching somebody new, I can't imagine an easier way. If you grab an earth box, which takes all the watering out of it, and you use a living organic soil, and you set up a mulch layer how we teach you, you're gonna have the best results you've ever had, both yield, quality, everything, and it will change your mind. And then if you wanna graduate, move up to bigger containers because you're trusting it, you'll get even better results. You can hand water, you can add the blue mats, you can really allow this to work with a busy lifestyle where it no longer is like anxiety driven. It's just living organic soil, very basic model, and you can follow, like we have our supplemental feeding guide, our new container setup guide, and if you go to BuildASoil, we have our water only guide, which is our ideal. But we realize the biggest mistake most people make is they start with too small a container, kind of want to dip their toe in, and they just underestimate what a difference accurate watering makes. First time you get like an earth box and you get like 8 ounces to a pound out of it, as opposed to 2 or 3 ounces when you thought you knew how to water, it just like unlocks something in the mind where you're like, okay, I wasn't dead on this watering thing. So can it be for beginners? 100%, just with a caveat, it's not for everyone. You have to have the intestinal fortitude to like pay attention to the BuildASoil way and cut through the noise of the internet and social media and listen to people that have the results that you want and trust the system, and you'll get really good results. But if you just go out there and say, I do living organic soil, what's wrong with my plant, and show a leaf, it's gonna be a hard road to hoe. There's just gonna be so much conflicting information because most people don't even know what living organic soil is. That's why we're making the videos, okay? What's the biggest misconception? Last question. I think the biggest misconception, now I'm gonna try and conceptualize this a little bit deeper in the sense of like, we could just cut to the chase and say, biggest misconception is people think everything's living soil and it's really not, unless it's got all the minerals, all the compost, it's got cover crop, it's got worms, like we could go deep in some random misconception. But I think the misconception is different. It's when you're brand new to growing, you've never grown before, and you come into living soil, you might look at it and say, well, how do I know what to do? I've never raised a plant before. Like, how do I know what it wants? It's like a baby, except for it doesn't cry. You're just like, I don't know, like how to make it happy. But what I see as the biggest misconception is when you've already been growing. Because when you don't know what you don't know, you like ask questions and you learn. The problem is when you're brand new, there's not always been a source of authority. And some people make it sound so sciencey. You need like a microscope and all this stuff, all this science just to grow a plant. You know, compost teas, all that, they're amazing, but it's like, you don't need any of that stuff, okay? And so I think the biggest misconception is when someone comes over from hydro, they have this idea that the soil kind of holds the roots and then you're feeding the plant and you can't do without feeding. And it's almost like instead of doing protein shakes and vitamins and all this crazy stuff, we're just gonna eat regular whole food and work out hard. And it's like, of course that'll work. Right? That's what living soil is. But then when you're just so used to be like steroids and this, you're like, how could any of that stuff over here work? And so the biggest misconception that I see is that container size. Right away, it blows people's minds. And then they misunderstand the setting up the mulch layer and thinking what a waste. So somebody will tell me, I just got all this living organic soil. You want me to get 15 gallons as like a minimum per pot? And they're like, well, can I just do a 5 gallon? Like I've done 1s and 3s my whole life. 5 is huge. And then I'm like, who cares? It all fits under the same 4x4 grow light, right? But anyways, with the 15, they'll start thinking, okay, that's too much soil. I already spent too much money. Now I just put the seed in and I water it and we're done. It's water only. Got the 15 gallons of soil. Bam, I blast it with water, blast it with light. We're good. It's like, no, this is a system. It's not a product, okay? So if you're into that, you just want to buy it and have a pound or whatever, just go to the dispensary. But if you want to learn this, I promise it's easy. But 15 gallon minimum or earth box minimum. And then up from there, 10 gallon is probably the minimum, but really 15 hits a sweet spot or an earth box. And then what happens is you need to understand that when we harvest, we're trying to keep the soil forever and not have it depleted. So when you're at a 15 gallon or bigger and you harvest, there's still half or more of all the nutrients and minerals and nothing's out of whack. And so then you can top dress and the feeder roots will go get it and the worms will pull it down and it creates an ecosystem. And so that is living soil. And I feel like at the end of the day, the biggest misconception is people go, oh, I don't need such a big container, I'll be fine. And then they're trying to feed it all these organics, which are like not as exact, accurate, and salty. They're more slow release, and they're more for like icing on the cake. It's more like the living soil is your 3 meals per day, and it's clean, good food. And then you can always add a little treat on top, a little protein shake. You can add some of the vitamins like the micronutrients. You can do a foliar spray if you really overgrow the container. Once you understand that paradigm shift, like, it's game over. You're not going to be like, oh, water only, and then ruin it. Versus understanding that there's no one right way to do this. Living soil is a system. We're here to teach it. We're here to make it easy. So if that sounds complicated, I just want to go on the deep dive. I promise if you're new, we got the recipes. We've already made the products. We've got the system. And it's more than soil, right, and a container. Realistically, the biggest pillar on this triangle, the foundation, is the soil, the environment, and all of that protocol. Like if you have the light far off, too bright, the humidity down low, the heat too cold or too high, and your soil is made of bad stuff with salt in it, the nutrients, the products you buy, the genetics you use will not matter. But if you get that foundation right and you learn the fundamental process, go to BuildASoil, go to education, learn the environmental protocols, learn how to set your grow room up, almost any product you get is gonna work. And it's gonna make the companies you buy it from look good. You're like, look at this, it's fucking crushing. Yeah, well, you have the best genetics, the best soil, the environment's perfect. Anything you do will work. And that's kind of the secret. Social media influencers that grow cannabis realize this. They're like, bro, no matter what I do, when I got my grow tent dialed, when I got my grow dialed, when I got the watering right, when I had the discipline, when I got good genetics and a good environment, everything I did worked. And so then they're like, look at me, I'm so badass. Like GMO, pulled 24 ounces out of the last grow. I'm like, it's all me, bro. It's not GMO. And that's part of the secret. It's not me, it's the system. Once you learn the system, you'll look like you had shortcutted it all and like you're a badass grower, but really we'll all know living organic soil is simple, it works, and you'll know what living organic soil is. I don't want to lose that message because it's from the people that created it, not just some greenwashed version of everybody who's jumped on and said, no, living organic soil doesn't mean that. So that's it. If you've got questions about this stuff, drop them in here because even my FAQs are going to have questions and we can make FAQs out of the FAQs. The rest of this year, we're going to continue educational, organizational FAQs, and we will also do YouTube specific video FAQs. So if you like this stuff and you want to learn more, you like the education, it's all free. It'll always be free here on YouTube. You can subscribe. If you want to support and help with the video editing and you just are passionate about this, want to become like an evangelist and spread it, we have our Patreon where you can donate a small amount that helps pay for all these videos to be produced. Otherwise, don't worry, it's always going to be free. You can just watch, subscribe, like, tell your friends about this stuff, comment on here. And until next time, I'll see you on the next BuildASoil video.